Okay, so yes, so today I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Witotoan language family. So something that has been interesting me for some quite interesting me for quite some time. So basically, let me see which screen it is. Yes. Okay, so basically, I work with one of the Witotoan languages for the Muri Muina language for quite some time, and then I moved onto other Witotoan languages. So basically, today what I'm going to talk to you about is how the expression of possession is done in this small language family, which is spoken in Colombia and Peru. So generally, when we talk about Witotoan languages, we are talking about a greater area, which is the North West Amazonia. So basically something that Sasha Eichenwald was talking about as well. The Tariana language and also the Tucanoan languages, they're spoken a little bit more to the north. But within that specific area, Northwest Amazonia, we have high diversity of languages and cultures. And we see there a lot of co-occurring language families, and one of those language family that we see there is the Witotoan language family, right? So just keep it in mind that this is very diverse area with a lot of contact between different types of peoples. Okay, so when it comes to the Witotoan language family, as I said, it's spoken between two rivers. That region, which it is delimited between the Caquetá and the Putumayo rivers. You might have heard of those names before. Before I always talk about the Caquetá Putumayo rivers, all just CP for a shortcut, so just CP area. Those groups are small and very dispersed. When it comes to the Witotoan languages, we basically talk about maybe of 3,000 speakers in total for the entire language family. So all those groups in the area, so for instance, the Boran languages or the Andoka, as Jakob is going to talk today about, they are tiny. So this is like the feature of those languages. And as I said, a lot of contact, not just within the CP area with all those groups that share that region, but also outside of the CP area, such as, for instance, Tucanoan or the Arawak peoples. Okay, so this area consists of three different language families. Witotoan is just one of them. Then we have Boran, Arawak, and one language isolate that today Jakob is going to talk about, the Andoka language. The Andoka language is it's spoken about by about 30 people, so it's a very tiny a language that has gone a lot of trauma in the last century. But the Witotoan languages, they consist of just three languages, which is the Okaina, Nonuya, and Witoto. Well, Witoto today we talk about Muri Muina as well, so I might just use the term Muri Muina for the Witoto language. And it is in fact a dialect continuum, which today consists of four different dialects, right? So keep this in mind when we talk about this Witotoan language family, but also remember that it is a part of a bigger cultural area, right, with a lot of contact. So for instance, within the CP area or the Caquetá Putumayo area, it is a very homogeneous area in which certain cultural features are shared, such as, for instance, the wooden drums that are used for the long distance communication. So basically, within that area, you had tonal languages. So those drums had high and low tones, and you were able to drum messages based on the tonality of a certain word phrases or words, right? Okay, so when it comes to the linguistic traits of the Witotoan language family, I'm not gonna bother you with amazing amount of data, but generally, when you look at the Amazonian languages, well, some are nominative accusative, some are ergative. Well, the Witotoan languages, basically all those languages in the CP area, they are nominative accusative, similarly just to the neighboring words, to the neighboring languages in that area. They are agglutinative, and what is very interesting within this specific language family, the Witotoan language family, is that we have this difference when it comes to the affixation. So we have a language family that consists basically of three different languages, and each language does a different thing when it comes to the prefixation. And we will see this. It occurs with the pronominal marking. So just keep this in mind that we're going to see that difference there. The Witotoan languages are predicate final, so we just have verbs in the end. And this is also a language which, very similarly to other Amazonian languages in the area, has multiple classifier system. So basically, what I want to say with this is that we don't really have numeral classifiers or possessive classifiers. We basically have one classifier morpheme that can occur in multiple environments. So it's not just possessive classifier, it's not just numeral classifier, just one classifier, and then it might occur with verbs, with nouns, and so forth and so forth. Therefore, as called by Sasha Eichenwald, we are talking about multiple classifier systems. So all those languages in the area have multiple classifier systems. Okay, so when we are moving towards describing what possessive strategies might be in Witotoan languages, well, basic distinction is obviously this juxtaposition. So basically what Luca was talking about, what other have mentioned as well, where we have a possessor and a possessed juxtaposed within the clause. So we have just possessor possessed within the clause, right? Where that possessor can be either a noun, can be either a pronoun. I will talk about pronouns, I will talk about nouns. I will also mention something which I think is very quite interesting with Witotoan languages, this idea of genitive case marking, which is a little bit different. I think that what other might say for Amazonian languages, it's not that similar. And I will also talk about something that is, I think, very interesting, because it is this archaic possessive prefixes that we see in Witotoan languages that are not productive today, but still there is this kind of this Amazonian, I don't know, flavor of what the possession might have looked like in the past, right? What might have been possessed in the past, but today we don't really see those differences anymore. And the last thing, I will talk about things that cannot be possessed in the Witotoan languages, which relate with the Witotoan culture and the norms and values. So something that Luca was talking about as well, right? So in order to understand possession for the Witotoan languages, we also need to understand the culture in which those languages are spoken in. Okay, so this is not something that you should really worry about. It's a lot of data. So the idea basically is that in the Witotoan languages, we have free pronouns and we have bound pronouns. And the free pronouns give rise to the bound pronouns. So you're seeing that the forms of the pre-pronouns or the free pronouns are the same as the bound pronouns. And what's interesting, I think, for the Witotoan language is something very similar to the languages spoken in the area, is that we have a distinction between first, second, and the third person, something common. There is a distinction as well between singular, dual, and plural. So I think this distinction of dual is something interesting. And that dual number makes a distinction between feminine and masculine, right? So that's something just for you to remember. You don't need to remember anything else. So this is the first person showing that free pronoun give rise to the bound pronouns. This is this is the second person, exactly the same. So just don't worry about the data. And the third person, as it is the case for Amazonian languages, it's that the third person is way different from the first and the second. So while we have this kind of forms that can't be really analyzed for the first and the second person, third person is a different creature. So we basically have a number of items of, for instance, demonstratives, classifiers, plural markers, they come together and they create a third person pronoun. So that's something that you're gonna see for Amazonian languages. That's just what you should remember, I think, when it comes to the pronoun system, right? Okay, now, so where when we talk about this juxtaposition of elements within the NP, right? One of the elements that can be in this um, in the possessor function, right? Can be a pronoun. And this is what we see here. This is very simple for the Witotoan languages. We basically have a pronoun and then the noun. So here, my father, or basically I father, my father, right? So this is very common for the Witotoan languages. Nothing very, uh, nothing very difficult about this. But I said that when it comes to the Witotoan languages, there is a difference when it comes to prefixation. So some languages will have prefixes rather than free pronouns. Yes. So here, Muruimoina is one of those languages which just uses free pronouns, as here in example one, and Okaina and Onuya is another type of are another type of a language that just use prefixes, and this is precisely what you see here. So in Okaina, just to say my house as in two, you just need to use a prefix, right? So there is this internal division between using free pronouns and using bound pronouns, yes, within this Witotoan language family. And you're gonna see this, for instance, also in verbal morphology, exactly the same. In Muruimoina, you don't use prefixes, but in Okaina and Onuya you do. So this is just this kind of internal division, and it comes up when it comes to the juxtaposition of elements within the NP with pronouns. Now, interesting is that I also mentioned that before, Witotoan languages, similarly to other languages in the area, they use multiple classifier system. So, basically, you just have this classifier element that can be combined with pronouns as well as in with other word classes, but here with pronouns. So basically, here have is this ko, which is a classifier for dog. You can combine it with kue, and you can get cueco. So basically, my dog, which function as an NP, right? Uh, headless, headless clause. So cueco would be my dog, or or you can also just spell it out. You can say my dog as it would be cuehico. So there is two different ways of expressing this NP, either as a pronoun followed by a classifier directly, or you just can have a NP in which each word is spelled out, right? And all of those languages, all the Witotoan languages do the same thing. Here are examples from Akaina and Nonuya that I'm not going to read. And yes, and then basically something that I was also talking before about, we just have this juxtaposition of two elements within the clause, not just with a pronoun as I shown you before, but just with a noun. So here, as in for an example from Muruinmuina, you have grandparents followed by the noun advice. So advice of the grandparents or grandparents' advice. This is a very, very common feature for the Witotoan languages to express possession. So that wasn't really quite interesting, I think, generally because it's common. But when it comes to the expression of possession, I think what's interesting is the genitive case marking that we see in Witotoan languages. And all of those languages, they share a form, at least a grammatical form that you see that can't be really reconstructed. It's not the same. Uh, so there is this element within the phrase that the Witotoan languages share, and they share it for the first and the second person, right? So as I said before, the third person pronouns in Witotoan languages is different, but the first and the second are part of the same system, and it also comes up here with this genitive case marking. So for instance, to say that something is mine, you would just use the pronoun I or my or I, and then just add this genitive case marking, and then it forms the form of mine or yours, right? So all the Witotoan languages share it. I give you some examples here just to show you that I'm not lying. Here in Muruimoina, in example 7, you have die hairako kuere. And this kue, I, and r would be the genitive marking. So this paddle is mine, this paddle mine, generally. All those languages do it for the first and the second person. Um, I might just skip the examples, but this is the same thing showing for Okaina and Nonuya. And I think what is interesting for the Witotoan languages is this idea of obligatory and optional possession. So something that Sasha was talking about, inalienable and alienable possession. Now, generally, when I first looked at the Witotoan languages for Moro y Moina a long time ago, I didn't see this. The possession in Moro y Moina today is optional, and it's optional for everything. However, when we started comparing languages such as Okaina and Nonuya, so other languages of the Witotoan language family, we see that this is not really the case, because in those languages, although the possession is not very strict. There is a couple of semantic classes, word classes that well, semantic classes that are obligatorily possessed. That was surprising because, for instance, for Nonuya, there is very little data. Me and Jakob, we worked with Nonuya only this year in 2024 in Colombia. So some data is coming up. The data from Okaina is also not very well described, so it's also kind of difficult, but we see that when it comes to Okaina and Nonuya, there is obligatory possession, and that possession occurs with the semantic types of body parts, kinship terms, and some nouns which are culturally relevant, but they refer to personal belongings. For instance, my hammock, that would be personal belongings. So then we see those things coming up. And an example here in Nokaina, you have a kinship term where you have the word, a bound word, ona, husband, which has to be prefixed. I said Okaina, no, you have those prefixes, so we just have haona, right? Her husband. Yeah. So that's obligatory. But in Moro y Moina, this is not the case. In Moro y Moina, everything is optional. However, that's at least what I thought. And then we started looking. I started looking at some constructions of some words in Morui, and I'm still looking at them, so it's not really finished. But I see something quite interesting for Morui Moina. Some forms of words, they contain a first-person marker. And those words are, well, not all of them, but many of them have to do with the kinship terms. So here in example number 12, you have the word keino, which means mother. And today, synchronically, you can also say a pronoun in front of it just to form my mother. Right. So today, synchronically, this is not productive, but we see those things such as keino all over the place. And example 16 from Nonuya, the word father-in-law as well. You see this bound form po, right? Which is actually followed by this archaic first-person markers, where in Nonuya, so you have upo. But in fact, this is a bound form, something that Sasha today talked about, some kind of Amazonian bound forms that need to be prefixed by possessive classifiers, not possessive classifiers, by pronouns, sorry. And today, synchronically, you have this hupo, which can be further prefixed by the first person. So you get huhupo. Yeah. And I see this, and like the more I listen to Sasha and the more I think about this for the Witotoan, for Moro y Moina, I think I might just write an article about this, because this is I think much more spread than I thought originally that it was. And now the final thing in this presentation is this kind of idea what's possessed or what cannot be possessed in the culture. And obviously there is certain elements in the Witotoan languages, such as, for instance, the ones that Sasha also mentioned. So things such as natural phenomena. Sorry, I put my timer. I think I said okay. So those are those natural phenomena, such as, for instance, wind and sun and moon. You can't really possess those things, but in addition to all of this, which is common for the Amazon, is also this idea that culturally there is certain things that cannot be owned by one person. I think Sasha also mentioned to this today. So, for instance, jungle garden that is owned by the entire community, that is worked and produced by this entire community, cannot be owned by one person. Yes, so it should be our jungle garden, not my jungle garden. So there's this kind of prohibition against individualization within this Witotoan culture that disallows you to have my jungle garden. However, with this change that today a lot of people talked about change when it comes, just with the contact with Spanish and the Spanish culture, it's interesting that today I also see this type of grammaticalization, not this kind of change in which this concept of what can be owned is also changing. So today we have couples, and those couples create small, tiny little jungle gardens in which they produce certain things. They are not as big as they used to be. So today, those jungle gardens can be owned by dual forms. So you and I, our jungle garden. Yes, it's still not possible to say my jungle garden. However, this idea of you and me dual form jungle garden is still fine. So it happens to some of the words in the culture. So for instance, I don't know, forest, language, voice, and so forth. So this is my conclusion, and I am gonna stop here. I try to kind of very rudimentary and very briefly try to kind of compare the Witotoan languages with this general Amazonian typology. It is very, very superficial. And I think what we should be doing is just kind of maybe comparing the Witotoan languages to the Vaupés area rather than general Amazonian typology, because there is huge amount of variation, and we just lose a bigger picture, something that Sasha also mentioned today. I mean, you can find in the Amazon everything if you really look for it. But generally, what we see is that assumption that there is this inalienable and alienable possession, something that is common for the Amazonian languages. I thought that we didn't really have it for Witotoan languages, not as it is for the Amazonian languages to that extent, but it appears that there is. But yeah, more research. The Witotoan languages, they don't have the pretensive markers, so basically there is no marker on the possessed, something that does occur in Amazonian. Sasha also mentioned that today. And I think, just this last thing, this conceptualization about what's possessed, I think that's a very interesting topic, because you can kind of compare across different cultures what's possessed, and then the culture comes up to life and you can see what's important within that given culture. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop here, and yeah, and thank you for the questions.